Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Helena Hudlin, and I am your co host for this evening, along with the incredible BK Smith. So, what's going on? Why are we here today? I can answer those questions for you. Today I will be sharing the first installment of my new speaker series, which aims to bring together a panel to discuss key issues. For my first panel, I am honored to introduce Mr. Ben Crump and Mr. Van Jones. So, a little bit more about our panelists. Mr. Van Jones, whom you might recognize from his incredible contributions on CNN, is here with us today. As the leader in the fight for criminal justice reform, Mr. Jones had a major role in the passing of the First Step Act, which was one of the most impactful pieces of legislation surrounding mass incarceration. Mr. Jones has also created numerous social enterprises, including the Reform Alliance, the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and Color of Change. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for these incredible contributions to our society. And later, we will also be joined by Mr. Ben Crump, who is one of the most important civil rights lawyers of the decade. His clients include people like Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, and George Floyd, whose trial is actually going on right now. Mr. Crump's passion for advocacy has led him to be on a path to fight for justice for the marginalized in our country, and we are just so honored that he can be here today and so thankful for all of his contributions. So, fun fact, I'm actually recording this introduction after our discussion. And this is because we were initially going to center the conversation around mass incarceration and criminal justice reform. However, as our conversation persisted, we found ourselves talking more about Black Lives Matter, racism, allyship, and what we as a Marburg community can do to combat the inequalities that plague our nation. So, without further ado, let's get into this discussion.
Mr. Jones, it's so great to meet you virtually and to have you with us today. Again, thanking the Hudlin family for this opportunity. So excited to chat with you a little bit today. But before we sort of get started with some of the questions, I just wanted to ask you, what are you reading right now?
I have been reading a book called Exponential Organizations, and it's really about the kind of philosophy and framework for organizations that get very big, very fast. And I think that those of us who are concerned about justice, who are concerned about the ecology, we need to start growing our movements and scaling our impact. So I figure the people in Silicon Valley have a book to teach them how to do it, I should read it. And the book is called Exponential Organization. So one thing people assume, if you're a civil rights person, you're only going to be reading, civil rights histories. I'm old enough now. I lived a bunch of civil rights history. I got only so many books and documentaries on that I can read. But I'm always challenging my mind to think about technology, to think about finance, to think about other cultures, other countries, mythology, theology. Just because there's so much to learn. And no matter where you are, what you're doing, you'll always find that you have a little bit of an edge on your competition if you've just got a little bit stretch of your brain, and that's what I use books for.
I love that response, and I really think, to your point, that we are progressing in so many different ways. And one of the things that, as an educator, we try to do is to teach the youth sort of the historical facts about what's happened. And this summer, I'm pleased to join a couple of my colleagues in taking a group of students to the South, from LA, to Memphis and to Alabama, Selma and Birmingham, and then ending up in Atlanta, maybe even the King Center, to tour the King Center and so forth, just so they could get a good idea, a good representation of what the civil rights sort of struggle was,
Yes.
from that perspective. So thank you for that. I just
Look,
think,
I think that's very, I think that's very good. You know, I grew up, my father grew up in Memphis, Orange Mound, Memphis, which was, you know, obviously the hood.
so I got my hair
in
cut.
Memphis.
When
Exactly, yeah, or the Orange Mound.
Yeah.
My father was in Memphis when Dr. King was assassinated. My father participated in a lot of the protest activities, so did my uncles. I just always remind people though, if you live in California, I don't care where you are, get in your car and drive 1 hour in any direction and get out. You'll be in Calabama. It's not just the American South. Every blue city in this country is surrounded by a bunch of red counties. Blue meaning, you know, Democrat, liberal cities are surrounded by a bunch of red, conservative, Republican counties. And you can, if you're in the Bay Area or if you're in Los Angeles, you get in a car and drive for an hour or two in any direction. You get out, you'll be in Calabama.
Right.
So, you know, we have, you know, these problems all over the country, and we have people who have narrow minds all over the country, and we have great people all over the country. We have great people in those red counties. We got great people in those red states. But I wish I could say it was just in the past, and I wish I could say it was just in a few states. Here in California, you've got you know, one of the biggest prison populations. California built more prisons during the prison boom than Texas did. And Texas has since closed 8 prisons, and California has only closed, I think we closed 5 youth prisons. But we haven't, even as the incarceration numbers finally starting to come back down a little bit, California is hanging on to its prisons. So it's everywhere. Good people are everywhere, and so are the reason for good people to fight.
Yeah, great. Helena?
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Jones. I have a question. So you said just after the election was called for President Biden, you were asked about your thoughts on the election results, and your first comment was, "It was easier to be a parent today and tell your kids that character matters." Now, what advice would you give to this generation about character?
You know, your character is what you do when you're under pressure and nobody's looking. That's your character. Character is your choice, is who you choose to be in the face of a dilemma. Where there's no good, easy answers, there's a cost to be paid no matter what you do. Who are you then? And people who have good character make good decisions when it's hard, good decisions when there's not necessarily anybody watching. You could get away with something maybe, but you choose to do something that's tough. Why is that so important? You know, character is like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. You're too young to know this, but if you know, you guys can eat pizza and sit around all day and still outrun me and outrun your parents and everything else. But as you get older, it turns out if you don't use your muscles, you lose them. And you get up off that couch, you may not be able to walk down the street. So let alone run. Character is that way. You can't try to get away with stuff and half do your homework and cheat on this and lie on that and do all these different things. And then when a big moment comes, be able to stand up and be a great person and do the right thing. No, you have to do the right thing all the time, or most of the time, so that when those big moments come, and it really does matter who you are and what you choose to do, you've got some strength of character. For instance, you know, I was born in '68, as I said. That's also the year they killed Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy has a daughter named Carrie Kennedy, who's been a mentor to me. Carrie Kennedy said her father always talked with her about moral courage. He said, any fool, any idiot will fight and stand up against their enemies. A dog will do that. Anything. If you're opposing somebody, they're gonna oppose you because you're their enemy. It doesn't take any courage to stand up to your enemies. It takes courage to stand up to your friends when your friends are wrong. That's character. It takes courage to tell your friends, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to talk about that person that way. I'm not going to try that thing you're trying. That takes courage. That takes character. to say, I know what's right and wrong. I know where I'm trying to go. You do what you want to do, but I'm not doing it. What I found is when I was coming up, I was very, it was easy for me to resist peer pressure. For whatever reason, what the cool kids were doing just didn't appeal to me because I could see the outcome of it.
Mhm.
I could see they were going to wind up in trouble. I could see they were going to wind up in jail. I could see they were going to wind up not having an easier path.
Mhm.
And so I avoided a lot of stuff. Some of the best decisions I've made in my life, I made when I was a teenager. Just what I decided I wasn't going to do, what I wasn't going to participate in, what I wasn't going to be talked into. Then it kept the doors open for me to go from being a kid of modest means and on the edge of a small town to go to Yale Law School, #1 law school in the world, to teach at Princeton, to be a fellow at MIT, to have 3 bestsellers, to have 4 television shows, to do all these things. But it started, the decisions that I made that let me go through all those doors, I started making when I was a teenager. I didn't start making when I was 30. I started making them when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, making smart decisions about who I was going to spend my time with, because I wanted to have impact. I wanted to have a platform. I wanted to make a difference. And I hate to say this, and it's a terrible thing to say, but a lot of those kids that I separated myself from, who laughed at me and called me a nerd and all the different peer pressure stuff, a lot of those kids wound up having very bad lives. And some of them are not here today.
Mhm.
And those that are here today, now when I go back to Jackson, they literally have a Van Jones day in my hometown.
Oh, wow.
There's a day when I go home, the mayor and everybody comes out, and the mayor doesn't come out to see the people who were making those unfortunate choices. Now young people, you can make bad choices and then you can make a good choice later, but it's better just to not make the bad choice in the first place.
Mhm.
And that's what, and so when you see people in high office who are making bad choices, you see people with great positions of power who are making bad choices.
Mhm.
They also probably started making those bad choices and getting away with them when they were younger.
Mhm.
And so you're in a very consequential time of your life right now, much more consequential than you know.
Yeah, trying to, and I appreciate that. I mean, I love the fact, Helena, I don't know, his comment about characters like a muscle, just resonated with me, and I hope it did you as well.
It did.
You think about, it's so difficult. I feel for the younger generation, these Gen Zs, to kind of wrap their head around what you just said, in the sense of extricating themselves from people that you know are not on the correct path. It's that whole phenomenon of cancel culture, maybe. It's like, how do they do that? And because everyone wants to be liked and wants to be seen, how do you deal with it? How do you
Look, I'm so glad that I had the mom that I had. Now, of course, we didn't have Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and all the stuff you guys have to deal with, and so I grant that you guys have a little bit more challenges, but right's right, wrong is wrong, and the same rules apply. My mom was a high school teacher at the high school I went to,
Mhm.
and when I got to high school, I was like a bully magnet. I just attracted bullies. I just for some reason, I was a nerdy kid with glasses and, like my books more than I like, shenanigans. And so I attracted a lot of bullies and a lot of teasing, a lot of taunting. And I would come home and I would be sad. Of course you're sad. Everybody would rather be liked than not.
Mhm.
But my mom told me something, and it turned out to be true. She said, high school is a very short period of time. She said, and there are some people who, high school is where they peak, that they're the most popular, the most this, they're the most that, everybody likes them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's their peak. And 20 years from now, they're still gonna be talking about high school. 30 years from now, they're still gonna be talking about high school, what we did in high school, what we did in high school. And she said, this is not gonna be your peak. It's just, she says, your peak will come later. She says, the brawny people rule now. the brainy people rule later.
Mhm.
So all the girls like the football playing guys and that type of stuff. Now, good, that's God bless them. But your turn will come when all those books you're reading pay off and all the trouble you're not getting into unless you go to a good college and get a good job, and your turn will come. And for whatever reason, I really listened to her. And it gave me a little something to hold on to while I was being passed over by the prettiest girls and the popular kids and whatever. But I had a vision beyond high school. And in some ways, it fueled me. I said, I'm going to show you guys. You may win today, but I'm going to win tomorrow. And I think it's important for young people to realize that tomorrow always comes. You might not got invited to this function. You might have, somebody might have, put something nasty on when you posted something and whatever, and you can upset, but you know what? Tomorrow always comes. Don't worry about this Twitter cycle or this Instagram thing, or why does she get 500 likes and only got 14? And you know what? Tomorrow always comes. And tomorrow, if you're focused on the right things today, your tomorrow is going to be way better than the people who focus on the wrong things today, even if they're getting more attention for it. And I hate to sound like an old dude, but I'm going to tell you, I am an old dude. And I have seen a lot of stuff. And popularity comes and goes. I'm famous. Yeah. Fame comes and goes. There's some years where I'm got best-selling books and I'm winning awards, and there's some years my books nobody wants to read. But your successes give you your confidence. Your setbacks give you your character. It's when you're not popular. It's when something you really want to work out doesn't work out. That's when you grow the most. That's when you have to figure out who you are and you develop the strength to push ahead. I'm not a tough guy. My father was a military guy. He was tough. You could literally smash his hand with a hammer. He wouldn't even blink. I'm not tough. I'll cry. Y'all see me cry on TV. If you see me at all, you've seen me crying. But I'm not tough, but I'm resilient. I will keep trying. I will come back. I will try again and again and again until I can finally figure it out. And that's what pays off. There's a lot of people who are going to be flash in the pan people. They'll be popular for as long as they're popular. And then when they stop being popular, they're not going to know what to do. If you're not popular right now, you're better off because you're developing character. You're developing strength. You have to figure out who you are, not who the crowd tells you are, not who the algorithm tells you are, not who the likes tell you who you are, but who are you for real without the likes, without the algorithm, without the crowd, without the fans. Who are you? If you can figure that out now, when you get where you're going, you're going to be so much stronger, so much more successful. Nobody predicted that I would have the career that I have. Underestimated me and counted me out when I was a kid to a person, except for my parents and a couple teachers, to a person. But I was able to develop the character to persist. And now most people would like to have the career that I have.
So, Mr. Crump, you just won a large settlement for the George Floyd trial. Congratulations.
Huge.
Thank you.
Huge. And is there any foreshadowing that settlement is relative to the case itself?
Well, that's an excellent question, Helena. And I know Van and I, we dealt with Trayvon Martin. We dealt with Michael Brown, all these cases going through Philando Castile, Eric Gardner, Alton Sterling, Sandra Bland, Laquan McDonald, and so many young people of color who have been taken from this earth far, far too soon. And one of the things I will say, and it breaks my heart to say this in 2021, but as Van and Brian both know, there's absolutely no guarantee that a police officer will be held accountable for killing a Black person unjustifiably. We can never take it for granted. We have to do everything in our power to stay vigilant, stay focused, and to keep using our voices to say we demand equal justice. Something as I mean, something as clear as George Floyd, something so evident. I literally was talking to Van's colleague, Anderson Cooper, the other night after the settlement, and they asked that same question. And I had to tell him that we can't take it for granted. And then he asked me, Helena and Van and Brian, he said, well, we all understand this is a very difficult case. And I just had to respectfully say to Anderson, this is not a difficult case. If that was a white citizen face down in handcuffs and the police kneed his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, nobody would say that was a difficult case. But because it was a Black man down there, race permeates everything in our society, especially our criminal justice system. And the fact that they're going to assassinate George Floyd's character after they assassinated his person is just so unfortunate and so tragic. But that is the playbook. That is what they have done, not only for the last 10 years, but it goes all the way back to the 60s and the 70s, where they first started to arrest police officers for killing us. Because then, as you all well know, for the first 300 years, the police killed Black people with impunity, and there was no accountability whatsoever. But in the 60s and the 70s, they just started attacking the character to say that they're not worthy. They're not worthy of the consideration. They're not worthy of the humanity. And what we learned in law school, and I'll say this, hopefully answering your question for you and your classmates, they taught us in law school, if you have the facts on your side, well, by all means, argue the facts. But if you don't have the facts on your side, then attack the character of your opponent as hope to distract people from being focused on the facts. And that's exactly what they're going to do in the George Floyd trial. They're going to try to attack his character, call him everything but a child of God, in hopes, Helena, that you and everybody on that jury will forget watching George Floyd being tortured to death, a human being being tortured to death. They don't want you to pay attention to that. They just want you to say, this Black man, he wasn't perfect. So therefore, you should not give him the consideration of the constitutional dignity.
And you know, the thing about it to me is that, you know, for this young generation coming up, seeing these things over and over again on your phones can be very desensitizing. It's almost like it's becomes normalized. It's almost supposed to happen. But a white man choking the life out of a Black man while the community stands by in horror screaming has been happening for 400 years. That's a lynching. That's what a lynching is, a white man choking the life out of a Black man in front of the whole community in broad daylight while we're helpless to do anything about it. And that's why, but this is the first time you've seen in real time a from beginning to end lynching that was with no breaks. If that woman had sneezed for a second and just shook the camera, then they would have said, oh, well, while she shook the camera, in that minute, he jumped out with a knife, and that, you know, I mean, they would have come up with some crazy, preposterous story. But because it was from beginning to end, 8 minutes and 20, and not one hiccup, they had to accept what they were seeing around the world. Now, the good news about it is that—
Van, can I interject, Van, just briefly? Yes. Because you talked about that young lady, Darnella, and she is the same age range as Helena and her classmates are. She was 17 years old. And can you imagine, Van and Brian, the post-traumatic stress that that young lady who held that camera there for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and witnessed an actual human being being tortured to death, and literally, Van, what was so upsetting, people said, well, why didn't she do something? Why did she just film it? A young
It's a young
black
girl.
lady gonna go and challenge the police? We know what happens when marginalized people of color challenge the police. She might have suffered
The
a
two people
similar
did.
fate, exactly, to George Floyd. So you all, we think whatever you all are doing, keep doing it, because everybody has a role to play, like Dr. King said, in the struggle for equality and justice. Her role that day was holding that cell phone to show the world. I'm sorry, Ben, for interrupting you, sir.
No, I did not realize she was that young, and I didn't realize that people were that dumb to tell her that she did something wrong when she's up against the fort. There were grown men that didn't do anything because those grown men knew they could have been shot down in a second, and it would have been justified, according to the laws of the land. If you interfere with a police officer, he has a right to use force against you. So, but what I just wanted to just say that, this is it's become normalized to see these kind of videos. But when I was coming up, it was very unusual. And the first time I ever saw this was with Rodney King back in 1992, when video cameras were very, very rare in our community. You might have one for the barbecue or for the wedding, but you weren't gonna just have a video camera with you. That was too rich. It was too much of a luxury item. But somebody took a video of 4 white police officers in Los Angeles beating a black man almost to death named Rodney King. And people around the world saw that video the same way they saw this video. And people were very shocked when the jury came back and acquitted the police officers and said that them beating the hell out of that man was justified and was not a crime. And people daggum near burned LA to the ground, and there were protests all around the world. So we've seen, those of us who were old school, we've seen in the past the world be shocked by a video, but then to see a jury get tricked and manipulated into giving the wrong verdict. And so that could happen again. And so on the one hand, you always want the family to be compensated. And in this case, Attorney Trump was able to get tremendous compensation. I've never seen a number that big associated with police brutality case. It may be the biggest award in the history of the country. So that's good. You want the officers disciplined, demoted, and or fired, all of them. And you want the officers who are guilty of these kind of crimes to go to jail and to go to prison. And so we are 1/3 of the way. The officers fired Attorney Crump.
Yes, they were all terminated. So you absolutely right. 2/3 of the way. And Ben, can I say this, because I know we're talking to young girls, and I know you used your voice brilliantly to talk about our sister Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
And this past weekend, we recognized the 1-year anniversary of the tragedy. And yes, George Floyd, we were able to have the city resolve it for $27 million, which was the largest ever paid out in a police civil rights wrongful death case pre-trial. So that helped raise the value, we hope, of Black lives. When we say Black Lives Matter, for the longest time, they would kill us and you wouldn't get anything. Van knows all too well that they, on average, kill over 1,000 people, and a disproportionate number of those are African American, and hardly do those families get any form of justice. The police don't get arrested, and they don't get a penny for the tragedy. And so that's what makes George Floyd and Breonna such a landmark. Breonna, $12 million was the highest ever for a Black woman. Up until that point, a Black woman was killed in America, and all they would get at most would be $1 million. Ayanna Stanley, the 12-year-old man who you remember killed in Detroit, Michigan, and a no-knock warrant, her family only got $1 million for that beautiful little angel. So hopefully with Breonna, it has set the precedence that Black women need to be valued more. And the last thing I would say, we remember what Malcolm X said, and Breonna is a referendum on that in 2020. He said that a Black woman was the most neglected, unprotected, and disrespected person in America. And so hopefully with Breonna Taylor, like Trayvon Martin raised the consciousness level of Black Lives Matter in America, we pray that Breonna's legacy will be she raised the consciousness level that Black women lives matter too in America.
Yes. Well said.
Well, I think that Van Jones, as he often does, has made the case quite eloquently. And we can never take Van for granted neither. He is our contemporary James Baldwin, being able to articulate the struggle in ways that is just so unprecedented. And he does it regularly on CNN. And I always sit down and I marvel as he can educate, engage, and empower people to be better than they are. And that's why I like what he says so much about Black Lives Matter, because when we get an opportunity to get allies, we have to seize those moments, because we can't overcome white supremacy by ourselves. We need a whole multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multi-geographical approach to overcoming white supremacy. This notion, I keep thinking about young people since we're talking to young people. I've been fortunate, Van and Brian, Helena probably saw this on social media. The Norman, Oklahoma high school girls basketball team were taking knees and so forth. And so my friend, Attorney Mike Lowe, and I are representing them and trying to make the State Association of High School Athletics in Oklahoma condemn this commentator and his company who called them effing N-words because they were taking a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance against racism and social injustice. And so we have to let these young women know every opportunity we get that it was something that was courageous, that was honorable that they did. Yes. And that simple profile of courage from those young women attract allies. We need to, every chance we get, tell our white brothers and sisters, we want to educate you and engage you and empower you as well to stand with us against the enemies of equality, to say that we're better than this America. We can be a more just America where George Floyd can take another breath, where Breonna Taylor can sleep in peace at night, and Ahmaud Arbery can run free and not be lynched for jogging while Black. We can do this, America, and we can do it in concert with our police. It's not that we're against police, we're against bad polices that use excessive force, like with why I'm late today. And I digress just to say, because you all are going to learn the name of Legend Smalls, a 1-year-old baby who was in the backseat of his 19-year-old mother's car while she was pumping gas. A bad guy was being chased by the police with a gun. He wrecked, jumped out of his car, ran to her car while she's just getting in her car, pulled open the door, put a gun to her head and said, "Get out the car." And she said, "No, I'm not. My baby's in the back seat." And it was so tragic. He jumped in her car. The police knew that she was in the car. They said they may not have known the baby was in the back seat, but clearly they heard her screaming and saw her in the car. The gas station was well lit, and they shot and they killed the bad guy. But in shooting in the car multiple times, a bullet went into her 1-year-old son's head, and he's still in intensive care 2 weeks later. And it's just crazy that we have police officers, when it comes to Black people, that shoot first and ask questions later. And Van and I and so many others have been saying, you can't do that. You have to give us the same dignity and respect and consideration that you would have if that was a young white woman pumping gas. I just don't believe they would have shot into the car with the young white woman. And so that's why we have to keep saying Black Lives Matter, because obviously those officers, for whatever reason, thought it was okay to shoot into a car with a young, innocent Black woman that they knew was in the car. And so that's what the struggle is about. And that's why we need everybody, when they observe stuff like that, to use their voice to say, we are better than this. We deserve better police in America.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I'm reminded, and Van, you're going to have to help me with this, Mr. Jones, but just I think he was a representative from Wisconsin who had made mention recently about the insurrection and how he wasn't fearful of that, but if they were the Black Lives Matter protesters, he would have been afraid.
Yeah, I deleted his name from my brain tonight because I'm off work and I don't want to think about this terrible person. But can you imagine when you have 10,000 mostly white people attack Capitol during a joint session of Congress, kill a police officer, rub feces on the walls, and mostly just go home unmolested, and have a top lawmaker say, well, I wasn't scared of those people. But if Black Lives Matter people had come out and been afraid, when Black Lives Matter people are saying, don't shoot baby Legend in the head, don't kill Breonna in her bed, you're more scared of Black people asking to live than white people coming to kill. Think about that. You are more afraid of Black people asking to live than white people coming to kill. Now, if you don't see something, and he explicitly said Black Lives Matter, he didn't say, he called out Black Lives Matter. And so this is the kind of thing. And so the good thing is, and I'll end where we started, because I'm going to have to hop off and talk to my friends at CNN. But I'll end where we started. Are things better, worse, or the same? They're getting better because we're having this conversation. They're getting better because it's no longer just African Americans going to our own funerals, unable to get juries and unable to get city attorneys and unable to get people to do the right thing. So things are getting better, but we have a very long way to go. And the young people who are growing up with the evidence on your phone every day, you don't have to guess what's going on. It's right there on TikTok, it's right there on Instagram, it's right there on Twitter. You have a responsibility, just like those young people did back in the 50s, those white kids in the 50s who saw that Emmett Till had been murdered. And then when they got to college and they saw Black students standing up against it, they saw Black students going to the lunch counter, they saw Black students going down south, they raised their hand and they said, I too am gonna go. And my godmother, Dottie Zellner, who was one of the white women who went down south and who was beaten and everything else that went on. You don't have to be beaten. The great thing is you're not likely to be found in a ditch someplace. You might have some people who don't appreciate what you're saying, but you can defend life. You can be a part of this movement. You can learn, you can be educated, you can support, and you can make a tremendous difference in a long legacy of white allies who have done the right thing, following the courageous leadership of African Americans willing to fight for our lives. And so I encourage you to do that. Do not fall for the okie doke. There is no a war on white people. There are 40 million of us. We usually, if we hurt somebody, we hurt each other. If you have a democracy in this country, it's because Black people fought for it. It's because Black people, when the chains came off of our ankles and off of our wrists, picked up the Bible and read it, picked up the Constitution and read it, and have been pushing America to live up to both of those books for almost 200 years. If you have a Western civilization, it's because Black people help you civilize it. If you have a democracy here, it's because Black people fought for democracy. If you have morals here, it's because we stood up for values and morals that were being denied to us to bring out the best in this country, and always with great white allies. And so there's never been any move we've made that's jeopardized white people. There's never been any advance we've made that hurt white people. Our advances have made America better and stronger. They listen to hip hop in Korea because of Black Americans. They sing "We Shall Overcome" in Eastern Europe when they're struggling because of Black Americans. They love Barack Obama and Steph Curry and Beyonce all around the world because of you can't stop this community. We're going to insist that America be America, and we need your help. And there's nothing negative about it. Be glad we're not negative. We're the most positive thing in the country, but we need your help. So with that, I'll let you go, and I'll let the attorney have this last word. So he just got where he's trying to go, so he might need to break himself. But thank you so much, Helena, for letting me be a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Mr.
doing it.
Jones.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Crump, is it okay if I ask you one last question?
Certainly. And I apologize again for my tardiness.
No worries. I understand you are extremely busy. So just kind of talking about this idea of what can we do as a community? What can we do to make the future a better place? What advice would you have to my classmates, high schoolers? Some of them don't have a phone. Most of us, including myself, can't even drive. How can we, make the world a better place and contribute to the advances in criminal justice reform?
Well, Helena, the fact that you're having this conversation is an important thing that you are doing. I mean, it's always little ripples that cause this big waves. I think, this is before your time. Brian remembered this. When Trayvon Martin was walking home from a 7-Eleven with a bag of Skittles and a can of iced tea, and a neighborhood watch volunteer with a 9mm gun profile pursued and ended up shooting that teenage child in his heart and killing Trayvon. I remember as I started representing his family, there was a young man, a young white man who was attending Howard Law School, who called our office and said, Attorney Crump, will it be okay if with your office and Trayvon's parents that I start a change.org petition to say that the killer of Trayvon Benjamin Martin should at least be arrested and brought before the court of law to face the witnesses and the evidence against him? Because he said, I know I can't make this thing right, but I can try to do something. And he started that petition. And that petition became the largest petition in change.org history at the time, with over 5 million people signing the petition. And so we can always do something. I think about those young ladies at the Norman High School girls basketball team. I mean, they all made a decision. It was 7 African Americans and 5 white girls on the team. And they made a decision every game. They were going to kneel in support of a better America and a better world, saying that racism didn't deserve any place in this world. And that's what they did. And it's so deep, Brian, that the thing they were kneeling against, when you have this commentator get caught on a open microphone
Which
saying,
he blamed on diabetes.
I'm sorry?
Which he blamed on diabetes.
Yeah, blamed it on type 1 diabetes. And Gail King and I talked about people with type 1 diabetes saying, don't go saying that. That's a side effect of having diabetes. But what I thought was so astounding by the very thing they were taking a knee for became evident in that person spewing that vile hatred and racism. And because of that, it now has broadcasted their courage, their act of, a better world. That simple demonstration of those young ladies who nobody would have known about had they not been taking that knee and being committed every game to doing it, that people like LeBron James and now seem like Oprah Winfrey are all starting to applaud them for standing together and standing up. And so that's what you and your classmates can do. Just simple things. Even when you think nobody's watching, the whole world may be watching. And that is a lesson that, you all can do. Whatever you all think that might be small can all of a sudden become very consequential over the entire world. And I know you all represent the best our future have to offer. And we know that you all are going to help in this struggle for equality and justice for all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Crump. We really appreciate you being here tonight. Helena, you
I just wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you for all of your incredible and thoughtful comments. And I'm very much looking forward to sharing this conversation with my school, because I know that, you know, any conversation, but especially when we're able to include leaders like you, leaders of change who want to make the world a better place, I think that, you know, we can all learn and take something from this. And just like those girls did, like you said, you know, small things, well, not small, but acts of courage and being courageous, it can really make the world a better place and raise awareness to issues like this one.
Brian, she's talking about these matters of history and connecting to you and your classmates and what you can do. You and your classmates are doing what John Lewis did back in the 60s, getting in good trouble. So I thank you, applaud you all for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Take care.